think from the brain, some said. No, think from the heart, said the others. But end of the day, people will think and act based on how they feel. In other words, based on their emotions. If you are managing a group of people or an organization, how strong, how positive the emotions of your team members are will matter a lot when it comes to getting the best out of them. Now here in BISNOMICS today, we will be focusing on emotional intelligence. How can you as a leader be aware of the emotional situation of your team members, and how can you use that knowledge, that awareness to get the best out of the people? Because like I said, end of the day, just knowing what you need to do won't help. You need people to feel the need to do something. And joining for this discussion with me today is an expert in the field of emotional intelligence, Mr. Sahan Dharmatileke. Sahan, welcome to BISNOMICS.
Thank you so much.
I hope you are going to make sure that I will end up with positive emotions enough to last the rest of the year. That's the plan.
Well, you'll decide at the end of the session. Thank you so much for inviting me, Tarinder.
Pleasure, Sahan, pleasure.
Yeah.
Sahan, let's talk about this concept of managing emotions in the workplace. Because if you look at some of the classical theories of leadership, they always said people are just like machines. Tell them what to do. If they are not doing it, punish them, scold them. If they are doing it, reward them, get it done. If not, replace them. But then again, people are not like any resource. They have emotions. End of the day, I believe you can't get work done from people. You need to get work done with people. And doing that means you need to be aligned with their emotions.
Yep.
How important is managing emotions in the workplace?
Yeah. So it reminds me of a quote. It's quite an old quote from an old man by the name of Sun Tzu. The correct Chinese pronunciation according to a Chinese...
Probably the greatest battle warrior the world has ever seen.
Yes.
3,000 plus battles and never lost a single battle.
So,
Art of War.
Art of War. So this philosopher, general, and the one who wrote this manual and called it Art of War. So Sun Tzu, or Sun Tzu, according to a Chinese friend of mine, that's apparently how you pronounce it. There's a quote from Art of War where he tells, and I'm paraphrasing here, if you treat your soldiers like your sons, they will face any battle, right? So, and this is very important. Soldiers are not supposed to be treated by their generals like their sons, right? But what happens if you start treating them like their son? A son would do anything for the father, right? Would you do anything for your father, to your mother? Thus the same rule applies. Humans are emotional creatures. We forget that deep down we are still primitive creatures. The human civilization survived because of our ability to work in groups. And to work in groups you need empathy. You need intrinsic motivation. You need self-awareness. Not only internal self-awareness, you need external self-awareness. So this is why emotions are important. And I feel very sorry when I hear an employee say, or a CEO or a managing director would approach me and say, you know what, X many number of people left. And I would ask why? Because they got 10% salary increase. So they worked for a year, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's no equity. And we talk about brand equity when it comes to brand management. I was a global brand manager back in the day. So you haven't been able to build equity, a genuine relationship with your employees, and they're willing to leave for 10% salary increase.
And Sahan, if I may ask now, Sri Lanka in general, we've been having a lot of stress, and we have been ranked as a very high stress country. So in a country like that, when people come to work, they're obviously stressed out. And you can't expect much positive emotions from them, which definitely will affect the work performance. Because let's face it, theoretically you can say, look, when you cross the workplace entrance, leave your emotions and family problems, everything at home and come. But practically you can't do that. We are all humans, we have emotions. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so neuroscientifically speaking, if you speak to a neuroscientist, they'll definitely say humans are not rational creatures, we are emotional creatures. However, we justify our emotional decisions by taking stats from here and there, and we justify.
Correct.
So if you study, I would encourage our participants to search the name Dr. Antonio Damasio. He's a Portuguese-American neuroscientist. With his research, we now know that if the limbic system, that's important, of the emotional processing part of the brain, and the prefrontal cortex, the rational thinking part of the brain, the creative thinking part of the brain, the logical thinking part of the brain, they communicate frequently. The moment this channel is damaged, humans can't make any decision. Zero decisions. It doesn't affect your IQ, but your decision-making power becomes zero.
So, the more stressed we are, the less better decisions
Definitely.
we make.
Yes. So, what happens when you're stressed? The rational thinking part of the brain actually shuts down. So, a very primitive part of the brain takes over. That's why if you speak to an individual and ask, list down your top 3 stressors, they'll write 30, right? Because this is human mind, so around 60,000 thoughts occur in an average human being, and 80% of these thoughts are negative.
Correct.
And scientists call this the negativity bias. So this is how we've been hardwired, but you can overcome it through emotional intelligence.
Yes, we are going to come to that. But before we do that, I saw a very interesting fact that in Japan, more than the amount of people who died of COVID-19 in 2020, more people have died due to suicide in 2019. Even in Sri Lanka, we have been ranked among some of the countries with a very high rate of suicide. So clearly people are not happy, and lack of positive emotions or lack of emotional well-being is clearly a bigger problem than even the pandemic.
Definitely. So this is something that people don't really talk about. In a single day, on average, 150,000 people die. Right?
Okay.
150,000 people die. During the height of the pandemic, I think around 15,000, 20,000 people died. Right?
So 1/10.
1/10 in a single day. So that means 4.5 million people die in a year, in a month. In a month, 4.5 million people die. Unfortunately, yes, obviously because of accidents, because of physical ailments, people die. That's fine.
Natural causes.
Natural causes. But like you said, taking your own life, and this is something which we've seen on so many occasions. Right?
Even in Sri Lanka.
Even in Sri Lanka.
On a daily basis.
On a daily basis. And I'll tell you, I consult managing directors, CEOs from across like 30 countries. In Sri Lanka, I met 2 CEOs who had suicidal tendencies. CEOs, extremely educated, well off, right? So financially very stable, but if you don't manage,
so money was not the problem.
Money was not the problem. And if you look at Sri Lanka, unfortunately, Tarindu, 1.5 million people suffer from depression and anxiety in Sri Lanka.
They are not willing to admit that most of the time.
Unfortunately, it's a sad situation. It's a dire situation. We are ranked as the 6th most stressed country in the world. We've beaten United States
in a bad way.
In a bad way. United States was ranked as number 7. So this is according to the Gallup Global Emotions Report published in 2019. So,
and Sahan, it is also a cultural thing, because for example, if you take countries like, for example, Australia or even the United States or in Europe, visiting a therapist is not seen as a bad thing. All right. A couple going for, let's say, couples counseling is not seen as a bad thing. But here in Sri Lanka, if ever you say you should go and talk to a therapist, they'll be like, you think I'm mad? I mean, this is the mindset, isn't it? That if you visit a psychologist or if you visit a therapist, that you're mad. But this has to change. Because otherwise, we will be just furthermore buried in this huge mountain of stress, and there's no way out. That also brings me to the second question about emotional intelligence. What exactly is emotional intelligence, and why should business leaders have that?
So I think emotional intelligence is important because, Tarindu, even corporate leaders and even Sri Lankans, when we start drowning, we are willing to ask for help. But actually, you don't learn how to swim when you're drowning. You learn a tool, a technique, when everything's hunky-dory in your life, right? That's how you learn. Unfortunately, when you reach a certain point, you do need to see a psychologist. You do need to maybe even take medication under the guidance of a psychiatrist. But if you do learn tools and techniques, especially when you're young, right? Now you see in United States, UK, emotional intelligence is a part of the school curriculum.
They are being taught mindfulness,
definitely.
yes.
So mindfulness comes under emotional intelligence, especially when it comes to self-awareness. So Daniel Goleman talks about you cannot cultivate self-awareness without mindfulness. So we are not talking about reaching enlightenment or being one with God.
It's about being aware of yourself, being aware of what's happening to you.
Definitely. So being aware of what's happening inside you, your thoughts, your emotions, the environment, and observing it non-judgmentally. So that's why emotional intelligence is important. But let me try to come back to the question at hand. So everyone talks about emotional intelligence, but not many people know that it was a term coined by two researchers, some of the most prestigious researchers that we've seen during the last 20 to 30 years, Dr. Peter Salovey and Dr. John D. Mayer. So they actually said, you know what, human beings have IQ, that's true, like the inherent intelligence that we possess, but we also have a tool, a unique ability to identify our own emotions, identify the emotions of others, and to manage these. And this was further popularized by Daniel Goleman's book, Emotional Intelligence, why EQ is more important than IQ. So emotional intelligence is essential for us, but emotional intelligence is an umbrella term. Underneath emotional intelligence, you actually have 5 factors. One is self-awareness. You have internal self-awareness, external self-awareness. Then you have self-management, so emotional regulation. Number 3 is empathy. Number 4 is motivation. You have intrinsic, extrinsic motivation. We are talking about intrinsic motivation.
You need to know what motivates you.
Yes. So that pay slip at the end of the month
is not what makes you happy.
That definitely isn't what makes you happy.
Yeah, but if that's the case, we won't have billionaires committing suicide.
Definitely. And you'll remember, let me not quote the organization, but a few months back during the height of the pandemic, a very prominent CEO from the United States committed suicide.
Yes.
Right?
And another example is Robin Williams. He kept the whole world happy, but he himself was internally not happy. So I think this is a global problem, Sahan, as you were saying.
This is a global problem.
I also want to ask you for a quick tip here. How can I observe if something is wrong with the emotions of my people? Sometimes you see them being very fidgety and all that.
Definitely.
But what else, anyone who is watching this show, who is managing a team, leading a team, what should they observe in their team members?
Yeah. So whether you like it or not, you're playing the role of a mother or a father in an organization if you're a leader, right? So let's not go into the psychology part of it. So it's your duty. Like, how would you treat your son or daughter at home? The same way you should treat your colleagues, friends, your subordinates. So number one is, there are simple things that you can observe. One is, are they getting enough sleep or not, right? So they might not come up and say, I'm not sleeping enough, but if they are turning up to work late, if they were very passionate about work and suddenly they are no longer passionate, they are lazy, lethargic, don't come to a meeting on time. So these are little alarm bells, right? So from the behavior, you can identify whether someone requires help or not. Then the other thing would be alcohol consumption, coffee, and drugs. So these are all stimulants. So when you're stressed, you seek a stimulant.
Like escape.
That's an escape.
Or imaginary escape.
Definitely. So usually what happens is when you take a stimulant, your stress level actually increases. So because of that, you have to, like for example, alcohol is a great example. 65% of the Lankan population doesn't actually drink alcohol because most of our women and youngsters don't take alcohol. But the remaining 35%, mainly
they make up for
men, they actually consume a humongous amount of alcohol. So it's not an exaggeration when they say amongst our countries, Sri Lanka has one of the highest per
capita alcohol consumption.
Yeah,
yes.
So
that's also a sign of stress.
That's also a sign of stress.
Or rather poor emotions and poor work ethic. So I think what you're saying is that when you're a business leader, you have to be, you have to have your eyes and ears tuned in towards these people. And if you notice a slightest change,
Yeah.
talk to them, just have a chat,
Definitely,
isn't it?
definitely.
Right. We'll take up more on that after the break.
Sure.
How can you keep your emotions positive? Let's talk about that on the other side of this break. This is BISNOMICS. Welcome back to BISNOMICS, your weekend's most profitable 60 minutes, which today we are trying to make it your most emotionally profitable 60 minutes. In fact, our focus is on emotional intelligence. How can you keep your emotions strong and face your challenges better and be successful? And joining me for this discussion is an expert in emotional intelligence, Sahan Dharmatileke. Sahan, tell me, what do I need to do in order to manage my own emotions better? Because if I am happy, I really feel that I have nothing to worry about. But especially when I am stressed out, I am juggling multiple careers, I am juggling multiple different challenges at a given time. In fact, from the moment I wake up to the point which I go to sleep, challenges. And this is not only my story. I believe this is the usual Sri Lankan story, no matter what career, even if they are doing only one job in one company and they are having the weekends off, still balancing with family and work, it's a huge tussle. But especially when things are not looking too well, when the sky looks grey and when the chips are down, how can I keep my emotions positive?
So that's a great question. I'll make one small correction. It's universal. It's not a Sri Lankan issue. So if you take the United States, around $300 billion is lost due to stress, right? Around 1 million people don't come to work because of stress. Around 150 million rupees, or sorry, not rupees, the United States doesn't use it, our currency, no? So 150 million US dollars is lost due to productivity going down. So it's an issue, and it's an issue that affects not only you, it affects the whole organization, right? If it affects an organization, it obviously affects our economy, right? So to answer your question, I think as a leader, you have to remember that I usually say that the leader is the person that everyone cares the least about. In an organization, no employee will come to the CEO and would ask, "Sir, how are you doing? You know, we are going through a tough time."
Unless they are in the recruitment interview.
Yes. So unfortunately, and it's very unfortunate, because I've worked with corporate leaders from over 30 countries, and I see this over and over again. And if I were to quote a stat from Mindful Leadership Institute of United States, they actually said only 2% of the leaders actually take time off to work on themselves, to re-energize themselves. And I feel really sorry for our leaders.
That's true.
That's true. That's true. So if you look at the burnout rates, if you look at the suicide rates, if you look at depression, anxiety rates, go to any famous or popular psychologists here in Sri Lanka, and they'll tell you a significant portion of his or her clientele
feeling as if they are sitting on a time bomb.
Yeah, definitely. So I think number one is to accept when you're angry, frustrated, sad, depressed, accept it. You're not Superman or Superwoman. Yes, you've been seen Hollywood movies where you shoot at a superhero character, doesn't get shot. But you're a human being. You're a human being, therefore you'll have fear, anxiety like any human being. So I tell leaders, you don't have to play a role. You have to be your authentic self. If you're angry, frustrated, sad, well, in front of your core team, you can actually say, because of X, Y reason, this is what I'm feeling right now. It's okay to feel what you're feeling. Number two, it's not okay to react though. When you're angry or frustrated, reacting is not the solution. So
wait a minute. So what you are saying is the emotion is natural, but the reaction is a choice.
Definitely. So some of our leaders might have read Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. So Viktor Frankl was a Austrian neurologist and a psychiatrist, and he was also a Jew during the Second World War, and he was thrown in jail or in a Nazi camp, and so did his parents, relatives, brothers and sisters. Everyone was thrown into these camps, and only one sister survived. She escaped, and only Viktor Frankl survived. But after leaving this horrific period of his life, where he has lost all his relatives, friends, family members, he writes this book, and he, I'm paraphrasing here, he writes, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space."
The greatest space.
Yes, and this space, this is where our freedom and our ability to choose lies during this space or in that space.
Very
And
interesting.
Yeah, it's so interesting, and if I had said it, it would be some.
Yeah. But that guy, he says it from his experience.
His experience.
Yes. And Sahan, in terms of, so like you said, be aware, acknowledge your emotion, but you don't have to react to it. What more?
What more? So let me share a technique. So a technique that I usually share, and it's not something which I created. It actually comes from the Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute, the program that originated at Google, where they bring in neuroscience, mindfulness and emotional intelligence to one platform. So I was lucky enough to be a teacher.
Excellent.
To be the first Sri Lankan. So, in this training program, we actually share a technique, and it's called SBNRR. So stop, breathe, note, reflect, and respond.
Okay.
So let me
not
quickly,
R. Don't get to the R straight away.
Yeah, don't get to the R straight away. That's what usually happens.
Yes, exactly.
We are extremely good at reacting, but you'll also
we are perfect.
We are perfect at reacting, and that's the same way. If you have a pet at home, a dog or a cat, that's the same way that they react. So the only difference between you and another mammal is the fact that you have something called the prefrontal cortex, or the new brain, or the human brain,
or the ability to take control of your emotions.
Ability to take control of your emotions. You have the ability to send a rocket to the moon. My gosh, it's unbelievable, right? Your cat or dog hasn't done it, as far as I know. Right?
The dog can get on it and
go. That's the only thing that a primitive animal can do. So we have to utilize the creative part of our brain, the logical thinking part of our brain, the rational thinking part of our brain. And to do that, it's very easy for me to say don't react, but you need to have a tool. So here's the tool. Number one, stop. Let's say you get an email from a
Let's say I'm angry. My team has not done something despite me telling a million times. Right? Now I'm really annoyed.
Yeah. So you're in a boardroom, and someone stands up and says, "Unfortunately, boss, sorry sir, we haven't been able to do it." And you're about to lose it, right? You're about to lose it, right? You're getting triggered. So number one, stop. But every single cell in your body is saying,
go for it.
Go for it.
Unleash.
Unleash, right?
And like a Hulk smash kind of a thing.
Yes. And you'll feel good. That's what this very primitive part of the brain would say. It's fight or flight. If you don't do it now, you'll regret it. So number one, stop. Number two, it's very easy for me to say stop. You need an anchor. So one of the anchors that Navy SEALs, so United States Special Forces soldiers use, is breathing. And you take very deep diaphragmatic breaths. So they call it 4x4, or there's another term called box breathing. But anyway, it's very simple, where you take a deep breath in, you hold the breath, you exhale, hold the breath, inhale, and you do this for a few seconds, right? And whether you like it or not, your parasympathetic nervous system gets activated. So this is why Special Forces soldiers use it, because you're sent on missions where you're definitely going to get shot at, right?
Correct.
Yeah, and the chances of you returning back home is sometimes almost nil.
Correct.
So how do you not run away from a fight? How do you not react like a headless chicken and get your whole team would actually lose their life?
So that's your anchoring, you breathing.
So breathing is an anchor. Then number three is, so stop, breathe. Note. So you notice, so remember anger, can you
Yes.
touch anger? You can't touch anger.
No.
Sadness, can't touch anger, sadness.
But you notice that emotion in your
Yes,
body.
you notice that emotion in the body. So for example, if you take anger, anger is a universal emotion. So wherever you feel anger, I'll also feel. Someone in Africa, in a tribe somewhere, would also feel anger, and they'll also feel the same sensations in the body. So when you lose your temper, or when you're about to lose your temper, try to observe the sensations. Okay, how's my breathing? Shallow, deep, rapid? How's my heart rate? Has it increased, or is it very neutral? What about perspiration? Have you started sweating? What about your hands, especially when it comes to anger?
Clenched.
Unintentionally.
Yes.
Everything happens unintentionally. So you start noticing, and this is very important, you start labeling. Now here's the secret. When you start labeling, you're actually using your prefrontal cortex, because your language center resides here. So the primitive parts of the brain that goes, I need to punch this person, I need to scream.
It's slowly going down.
Yeah. So the language center gets activated, and gradually you can utilize this part. Some studies point out that it takes around 90 seconds to 120 seconds for this part to get activated. In Sinhala we call it tube light. Definitely, apparently when we are triggered, we are pretty much like a tube light. So you do need that time, you need to create that space, and finally you start reflecting. Now what do you
Why did this actually happen?
You don't ask the question why.
Okay.
Why is, when it comes to psychology, why is not a term that you should use. You should ask what. When you ask why, your brain will actually tell the reasons why you should punch that person, right?
So what will happen if I punch this person?
Yeah, so you can ask what is triggering these emotions in me. So first you look at yourself. So you have to be selfish before you become selfless. So why is it
important?
Yeah. So, and you'll realize more often than not, these triggers go even to our childhood, right? These small triggers.
Or maybe some unpleasant experiences.
Unpleasant experience. And you'll realize for some individuals, a single word is enough to trigger them.
Understood.
And I've trained about 700 prisoners in Valikada, so people on death row, people on life. I met CEOs there, I met doctors, like people with PhDs, MBAs, and you'll realize their lives have changed within seconds. Not years, not minutes. They are as smart as you, or maybe even smarter than us, but they are in jail, they are on death row.
Where they lost control of the emotions.
Yes, so this is why it's vital. And finally, you can even reflect on the fact that, true, this individual didn't complete a task, or this individual made a rude remark in a meeting. You can reflect, okay, this individual, pretty much like every human being on this planet, deep down we seek three things. We seek love, affection, right? Love and affection.
Absolutely.
That's why we get married, we have kids, right? Love and affection. Number two, security, right? It could be social, it could be financial, right? We seek security. Number three is respect. Most of our leaders lose their temper
when they are not respected.
Yes, and you see this over and over again. So these are primitive,
pretty universal, isn't
pretty
it?
Universal,
Sahan?
pretty
Yes.
universal. And finally, you come to response, and you respond not with the intention of teaching that individual a lesson. You respond with the intention of, how can I be of service, right? How can I provide a solution or a comment so that the relationship
Doesn't get damaged.
it actually strengthens.
I think, Sahan, this also comes as a part of building a positive culture within the organization, and we are going to come back to you on that after the break.
Great.
How can we build a positive emotions culture within the organization? And most importantly, is the government paying enough attention towards the emotional well-being of Sri Lankans? Let's talk about that after this short break. This is BISNOMICS. Welcome back to BISNOMICS, your weekend's most profitable 60 minutes. Our focus today is about building a positive, emotionally positive organizational environment where you can get the best out of the people. Doing that means you need to have emotional intelligence, awareness about the emotions of others and aligning with them so that you can get the best out of them for the company performance. And joining me for this discussion is a specialist in emotional intelligence, Mr. Sahan Dharmatileke. Sahan, let's talk about from a business leader's viewpoint. Let's say if I'm leading a team of 15 people, how can I create an environment with positive emotions?
Right, that's a great question. And Google actually had the same question. So their question was, how can I create an exceptional team? Right, there has to be a secret sauce, right? So which
The magic.
the magic. And they actually did a study for over 2 years. The project is called Project Aristotle. And they had some assumptions, right? So let's say you have a charismatic leader, a visionary leader. Maybe that's what driving team performance. Maybe that's what makes a team exceptional. Maybe you have someone who has graduated out of Stanford, Harvard. Maybe the education level of the leader, that's what's driving team performance. Or maybe, and this is something which usually happens, you hire a star performer from company X, a star performer from company Y, a star performer from company Z, and you get all these individuals together, you have a laundry list of star performers, and this will actually boost team performance. And they found out nothing works. There's no correlation.
I mean, we see sometimes in these cricket leagues, isn't it? I mean, you have the teams with all the best performers who don't perform at all.
Yeah, definitely. And the funny thing is, across all sports, whenever you have a group of, let's say, World 11 or whatever, you see they actually lose. They actually lose. And they found out there's a reason behind it. And I've seen this with so many organizations. The main reason behind a team's success is psychological safety. Psychological safety. Now, what is psychological safety? Your ability to share your problems, share your fears, share your failures with your team, with your leader. And you'll realize, if you look at some of the greatest organization that has ever existed on this earth during the last 10 years, then they're no longer there. There are a few names that come to my mind, right? Especially in the mobile phone industry.
Correct.
And this organization, after it was sold off to pennies, 2 Singaporean professors actually did a study. They spoke to the leaders as well as the subordinates, and they found out during the latter part of this organization, the junior management was fearful of raising questions. If you had an issue, you hide the issue, because the moment you raise an issue with the senior leadership team, you get shut down, right? They feel as if...
The no bad news culture.
No bad news culture.
So that increases stress, as you said.
Definitely.
So what you're saying is that one way of having a positive culture with positive emotions is to give them the freedom to ask questions.
Definitely. Ask questions and to share failures. And you'll realize everyone loves to share their successes.
Yes.
But if you don't fail, you'll never learn. And you'll always hide it behind something, or you'll hide it under the carpet. And this is a formula for failure.
This is why we say that success has many fathers, whereas failure is an orphan.
Yes, definitely.
So give the chance to share failures and to talk about it. Anything else, like are there certain rituals we can do in companies?
Definitely. So something which organizations, especially we know that United States is one of the most stressed countries in the world. It has been so for a good 20-30 years, even though Sri Lanka is heading in that same direction now. You realize that certain organizations, especially Silicon Valley organizations, they didn't wait for anyone else to do it. They internally started well-being programs. So you had certain large-scale, technological companies, insurance companies, motor companies, actually starting unbelievable, great programs.
Sometimes it might be giving like a meditation room for the people to meditate.
Yes. So mindfulness is one tool. Then emotional intelligence training is one tool. And remember that you have to give the tools before they start drowning. That's more important. And you have to identify ambassadors within the organization
Who will promote this concept.
who will promote it. And you'll realize that in a department, there's always an ambassador. Ambassador is not the leader.
Understood.
Right? So this is the individual that people usually come to seek advice. So the moment you get such an individual on board a well-being program, I think that's great.
Sahan, now we hear this term stress. I think especially the de-stress part, where the part that, or the distress part, where people are like the bad kind of stress. Now, myself as a person or anyone who is watching this as a professional, what can they really do as daily rituals in order to, maybe is there like a morning routine or is there like a me time? I don't know, up to you to tell us what works because you have experience in this. But what can I do, or what can someone watching who is stressed out do on a daily basis as a ritual to overcome stress? So solutions.
So broadly you can do two things. One thing is you can stop whatever that you are doing right now, and I'll say what you should immediately stop doing. And the other things are the new behaviors that you can incorporate into your life. So let's start with the simple things, the stuff that you should stop doing. Don't use your phone after maybe 10 p.m. There are studies that now show that if you sleep, if your sleep patterns are not up to the mark, it actually affects your mood the following day. So we now know if you don't have proper sleep, it can lead to depression, it can lead to anxiety, you'll end up having a sleep disorder. It affects your melatonin, serotonin levels in your body. So number one, your phone is pretty much your worst enemy when it comes to...
Technology is a bit of an emotional enemy.
Yes. So number one, as a leader, have a hard and fast rule. Beyond this time, I'm not going to use it. That's number one. Alcohol, cigarettes, hard drugs, I hope none of the leaders are taking, but I've come across such individuals as well. So caffeine, so avoid stimulants. Those actually don't help. Social media use, cut down as much as possible. If it's possible, don't use it at all, right? So this is coming from friends at Silicon Valley, who some of them developed these platforms, and they don't actually use it. If they want to post something, they upload it and they delete the app. And if you really want to post something again, you have to install the app.
Because it makes us really compare, isn't it? It has driven people to compare my life with other people's lives.
Definitely.
I'm having so much work, but I'm not having this. How come this person is with so little things, they are able to do all that? But sometimes it's not even real, it's just curated.
Yeah, definitely. And you'll realize...
The world is too busy trying to show the world how happy they are, and in trying to do that internally, they are not happy.
And actually, by doing so, you are hurting your emotional well-being, and you're actually hurting the emotional well-being of so many others, especially youngsters.
Understood.
Right? Because as a human being, you're supposed to feel sadness, right? You're supposed to feel, have anxiety, worry. So the things that you can start doing, if you haven't started practicing mindfulness, this is a great time. There are plenty of apps, use them.
Calm yourself down, be aware. Being aware of yourself sort of calms you down.
Definitely.
And as you very correctly said, limit some of this technology usage. I think some very valid points there, Sahan. On a final note, I want to ask you. Now, you said we are one of the most stressed countries in the world. I believe the government has a role to play in that, because we see this in foreign countries. Governments are playing a lead role in reducing this emotional stress that people are facing. My question to you, what can the government do in order to improve the level of emotional well-being of our country and especially our labor force?
I think there's a case study. The case study comes from Bhutan. So Bhutan was the first country to
happiness index.
Happiness index. Yes. So the gross happiness index. They said, you know what? Economic growth is great, but if your citizens are miserable, what's the point?
Very progressive thinking.
Very progressive thinking.
Also, probably the first ever carbon negative country.
Yes. And so the Prime Minister was in search of a solution. And they found out that Google had started this program in 2007, and they approached them. So Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute is the organization that's actually training all their civil servants, which in turn civil servants, a handful of them, so I think 125 civil servants, and they in turn train the rest of the civil servants. And they train a handful of teachers, and the teachers teach other teachers, and it goes to the students.
And then when that is combined with the fact that they are having a positive impact on the environment, that
Definitely.
they are actually absorbing more CO2 and then releasing more oxygen back, I think all that is definitely creating much more happiness, isn't it?
Definitely. And to be honest, Sri Lanka has only 20 million people.
But what is there any government program or plan to improve the emotional well-being?
So I know that after 1995, when we became the #1 country when it comes to suicide, there was an action plan, but I think we need to take it a step further. We need to target school teachers, we need to target doctors, especially doctors who train other doctors. We need to target civil servants. There's a lot of stress among public servants as well.
Absolutely.
In the private sector, obviously, I don't think you should wait for the government to do anything. You should, make sure it affects your productivity.
Because let's face it, I mean, in a peak traffic time, when you go in a train, you're packed in like you're into like a salmon tin.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't expect anyone to be having positive emotions after that.
And you'll realize if we look at news, Sri Lankan news.
All negative.
All negative, right? So actually, you'll realize that your employees are nothing but a cross-section of Sri Lanka. So if you think, in my organization, I don't have these issues, I don't have individuals who are contemplating suicide, you have, because I know, right? And so I think you need to embrace, but the good news is, there's some good news. I've seen organizations actually starting well-being programs. So physical well-being is great, but you don't get promoted because you have good strong muscles or you have a slim body.
Correct.
Right? Your productivity doesn't go up if someone builds muscle, right? So you need to take care of the mental well-being. So very recently in December, post the pandemic, a very prominent multinational started a program of training their employees, and they started training individuals. We call them mental first aiders. So 50 ambassadors who will train the rest of the organization, 700 employees.
Understood. So maybe the government could also look at doing a pilot program like that for
Definitely.
the public sector.
Definitely.
Some good thoughts there.
And I'm more than happy to help out because I already have links to the US.
Excellent.
And I'm willing to give my services free of charge if Sri Lanka wants to change
Brilliant.
itself.
Nice to hear that, Sahan. Our focus today was on the emotional well-being of employees. How can we create an economy, a society of people who are emotionally positive so that they are ready to bring out their A game? And I'm quite thankful to Sahan Dharmatileke for having joined us for this discussion. Sahan, thank you for those tips. Stop, breathe, notice, or rather note, and then reflect and then respond.
Awesome.
So I hope the viewers too will do that and manage their future stress situation. Stress is inevitable, emotions are inevitable, but the reaction is a choice.
Brilliant.
As a country, come on Sri Lanka, let's react in the smart way so that we can make sure overall our society too is a happy place for you and I and the future generations to be in. And on that tone, we will wind up today's episode of BISNOMICS. I will see you with the next episode. Your coming week ahead may it be profitable and full of happiness. Thank you very much.